Opposition in the difficult circumstances we face in mortality is also part of the plan that furthers our growth in mortality. All of us experience oppositions that test us. Some of these tests are temptations to sin. Some are mortal challenges apart from personal sin. Some are very great. Some are minor. Some are continuous. Some are mere episodes. None of us is exempt. Opposition permits us to grow toward what our Heavenly Father would have us become. After Joseph Smith had completed translating the Book of Mormon, he still had to find a publisher. This was not easy. The complexity of this lengthy manuscript and the cost of printing and binding thousands of copies were intimidating. Joseph first approached E.B. Grandin, a Palmyra printer, who refused. He then sought another printer in Palmyra, who also turned him down. He traveled to Rochester, 25 miles away, and approached the most prominent publisher in western New York, who also turned him down. Another Rochester publisher was willing, but circumstances made this alternative unacceptable. Weeks had passed, and Joseph must have been bewildered at the opposition to accomplishing his divine mandate. The Lord did not make it easy, but he did make it possible.
I just want to bring up something from the church's essay real quick, because I don't think Dan H. Oakes is quite painting an accurate picture of what's going on, and certainly not giving credit, I believe, to the people that kind of deserve it. In the essay, it says, when Rochester printer Elihu Marshall agreed to publish the book, Joseph and Martin returned to Grandin and Palmyra, hoping to print the book closer to home. Harris offered to mortgage part of his farm as collateral, and the men negotiated terms. In August 1829, Harris signed over the mortgage to Grandin, and production of the Book of Mormon began. It doesn't sound like the Lord made it possible. It sounds like they got enough money together, right?
It's like they weren't going to do it for free.
Exactly. So, the Lord intervened.
Yeah, I think, and this is something we have to be so careful in the church about, that we read miracles into things that aren't. And it's become a bit embarrassing recently. There's been talk by Elder Bednar where he described rushing to get as many people through the temple before a COVID lockdown as possible, and it worked out that they could get appointments for everyone, and people worked really hard, that this was a miracle. And he kind of declared miracles continue. Well, no, that's nice Latter-day Saints working hard and being busy. And the fundamental problem, you were just encouraging loads of people to risk their lives by cramming into a temple when the whole point was to get away from them. And the Alabama temple president has already died of COVID after soldiering on.
Oh, no.
And it's just, it's this having such little to talk about now, it seems, regarding the miraculous. It's really scraping the barrel now, and people are noticing. People have noticed that the old, we used to hear stories about apostles raising people from the dead, and now we're getting talks again from Bednar about having the faith not to be healed, and it's clutching at straws, really.
None of them are saying that they're having their weekly meetings with Jesus anymore. What happened to the stories of I saw Jesus in the temple the other day and he told me we're doing fine.
Which was mostly people making stuff up or projecting their hopes and the idea that, our prophet talks to God. Well, of course he meets with Jesus every week. And no one kind of fact checks, and they are being more careful not to claim that anymore.
I mean, we did have one, didn't we? It was one account, but I believe it was a Kimball, or their granddaughter published an account of them meeting with Jesus in the temple. And I think from that then stemmed this idea that, well, that must happen to all of them.
Because and they did nothing to disabuse us of that illusion.
Oh, absolutely not.
Because it definitely suits their authority and their power to do that. So again, the thing that's happening now is more and more people are realizing there's this radical difference between the claims and the rhetoric and what actually happens. And the internet empowers people to fact check in ways they never could before, and it's not looking good. And all because these men have chosen to be locked into their own infallibility, their unquestionable authority, and that they know best for us grown adults and the world.
And we as international members know particularly that,
Yeah.
you know, this idea that what's good for Utah isn't necessarily good for the rest of us.
No. And I think also that we often bought into this mythology much more powerfully, because we only would encounter a general authority maybe every couple of years. There might be one come and visit to reorganize a stake or do a conference. Whereas people in the heartlands in Utah, they live with them, they're related to them, they
Yeah.
see them in their wards, they
See 'em at
understand
Costco.
they understand that they're ordinary people as
Yeah.
well, much more. They can
Mhm.
still do a lot of hero worship, but they, whereas we were very much, all we had was the mythology, the legendary version of everything was taught to us as the truth.
Yeah.
So all it takes is people finding out that these people got things wrong, lied, made terrible errors, aren't what we were led to believe, that they don't meet with Jesus every Thursday in the temple. Then your unrealistic version of Mormonism that your testimony is based on shatters, and it's devastating. So that strength turns into a weakness, and hence we only have 15% of Latter-day Saints in Britain and Ireland still attending church.
Joseph's fifth attempt, a second approach to the Palmyra publisher Grandin, was successful. Years later, Joseph was painfully imprisoned in Liberty Jail for many months. When he prayed for relief, the Lord told him that all these things shall give thee experience and shall be for thy good. We're all acquainted with other kinds of mortal opposition, not caused by our personal sins, including illness, disability, and death. President Thomas S. Monson explained, quote, "Some of you may at times have cried out in your suffering, wondering why our Heavenly Father would allow you to go through whatever trials you are facing. Our mortal life, however, was never meant to be easy or consistently pleasant. Our Heavenly Father knows that we learn and grow and become refined through hard challenges, heartbreaking sorrows, and difficult choices. Each one of us experiences dark days when loved ones pass away, painful times when our health is lost, feelings of being forsaken when those we love seem to have abandoned us. These and other trials present us with the real test of our ability to endure." End of quote.
So he's talking there about the variety of challenges that we feel, you know, and experience from things that we don't control. So, you know, he's really acknowledging that well. But it just makes me reflect. He describes their feeling forsaken when those that we love abandon us. The trauma, the challenge, the things sinking people into depression and all these negative experiences and emotional psychological dramas that he's described there. These days, for a lot of Latter-day Saints, if not most of them, because most of them leave, is actually coming from the church and from what these leaders are saying and doing. Tip them into despair, either new things that they say that just don't feel right and don't sit well with what they've understood the gospel to be, or when they do a bit of research about the history of the church, they find out that these people they idolized and loved and trusted as their safe guides had actually made a lot of mistakes and deceived and done awful things, 150 years of institutional racism, teaching things like Brigham Young's Adam God doctrine that he added to the endowment and taught for decades, which completely messes up our whole concept of the Godhead, and had to be repudiated by later teachers and so on. And so you then experience this crash, this piling of your ideals and your hopes and your concept of what Mormonism is and your journey within it into this wall of reality that is nothing like as good, or it's very different, or it's much more broken. And that leads to depression, despair. I've been contacted by people just in the last 2 weeks, several of them experiencing traumatic dramas in their marriages. You know, we respect these people as general authorities. We pay them attention. We listen to them reverently while they're talking about these things. But we also need to remember the bigger picture. What they're saying often in these general conferences is causing real harm, catastrophic damage. I would argue to the whole church, because they're going with the Pharisee religion rather than the Christian one too often, or confusing everyone by teaching contradictory things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pain, and in his model, that's always coming from the world, the outside. It's never a problem we might have within the church, within our own institution.
The complete lack of introspection, and I think just from my point of view, really quick, that the absolute feeling of betrayal and of upset and of anger, sometimes kind of righteous indignation that someone is not behaving to the standards that they set out and they expected of you for so many years, and that feeling that you put your trust in someone who supposedly speaks to God and is the direction that comes from them is from God. So, you know, it's not that you take it blindly, but you trust it. You trust it as a reputable source to then take into your life. But then that's nothing to say of those members that do blindly follow it and just say, well, right, prophet spoke and that's it, done. And it can be damaging to both parties, and especially when they discover that that they're in a kind of a castle of glass almost.
Well, they're being set up for faith crisis. But be given the best metaphor I've heard for this is that if you have it's like clay. If you have a very rigid, hard-baked, fired, kiln, testimony that is absolute and certain, the McConkie Mormonism, where you can have your book Mormon Doctrine, it tells you what to think about everything and what it all means, and the church always has the answers.
It's all correlated. It's all spot on.
Yeah, safe. You know, that's that becomes the truth. The truth is this body of knowledge and decisions and opinions. You only need to find one thing that contradicts any of those, and your whole testimony is in danger and could shatter. It just needs the one little hammer pick to break the whole thing. Whereas what we need is resilience. We need to be able to bend with it. We need to be malleable like wet clay. When we're taught certainty that isn't certain, and ironically, so often absolute certainty about how many pairs of earrings you can have. But if you ask what really is going on with the Godhead, who is the Holy Spirit, why doesn't that person have a body? Is it Heavenly Mother in disguise? That it's like, oh, we don't know. You'll find out in the next life. Just put it on the shelf.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of certainty, but it's not about the useful thing.
They complain when our shelves break. But they're the ones telling us to put stuff on there.
And
right?
and literally using that metaphor, like the last year the Raz bands did Fireside for the young adults, and literally said, put it on a shelf.
Our efforts to improve our observance of the Sabbath day pose a less stressful example of opposition. We have the Lord's commandment to honor the Sabbath. Some of our choices may violate that commandment, but other choices in how to spend time on the Sabbath are simply a question of whether we will do what is merely good or what is better or best.
Am I the only one that finds that really milquetoast and pedestrian? It's just...
We're sitting here in the 21st century, the church is hemorrhaging members, major issues about fundamental matters, so much that we can speak positively to the world about, and they pick, of all the 10 commandments, the one that is most kind of about Pharisaical ritual. And he's introduced here again this exact obedience thing. Don't do good, that's not enough. Better is not good enough. You could be doing best. So, you know, like stay in your suit all day on a Sunday and all of these other things.
I used to.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Good boy. I struggled to wear a jacket, but good for you. I'm sure you've earned lots of brownie points in heaven.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's measurable. And there's always a gimmick, you know, every few years it's the new thing, and it really didn't resonate with people. And I just thought I learned everything I needed to know about keeping the Sabbath day holy in primary. You know, no one needs nagging about that when there's so much else that we could be doing. And the other kind of amazing, while I've been doing my Christians versus Pharisees podcast, so I ended up looking at the Isaiah 58, which is where they get the Sabbath day phrase from, calling the Sabbath a delight. And I was like, this chapter is incredible. It absolutely precisely speaks to what they're doing, to the crisis we're having in the church, and they picked the most boring bit at the end and ignored the rest. The first part of Isaiah 58 says, and you couldn't make this up, I don't care about you suffering and sacrificing when you're fasting and doing your Sabbaths for its own sake. You know, I'm not impressed by you wallowing around in sackcloth and ashes and suits. It's irrelevant. The purpose of this is to help the poor, to liberate the captives. And you absolutely can apply this to what the church has done with money, that they have hoarded tithing money. They have now well over $100 billion in stocks and shares.
They made 6 billion just last year,
which just made a profit of 6 billion, which would more than cover the entire budget of the church.
Absolutely.
It says, if you are not using the Sabbath, the fasting, the donations, the money to help the needy, and you're just doing it whereby the value you're teaching in tithing is to suffer and make the sacrifice, it's your own spiritual benefit. You need to suffer more because that's good for you. It doesn't matter what we do with the money. He said, you will not receive revelations. You will ask for guidance. You're not getting any. You will ask for the heavens to open and give you knowledge. I'm not talking to you until you give that money to the poor. And you will pray for healing. You will not get your healing blessing. And that absolutely speaks to what we've just lived through as a church. Our leaders are not getting revelations in any way like prophets used to, or Joseph Smith at least used to. It's been a century since they had a proper revelation canonized that wasn't just cleaning up their own mess of polygamy and racism. And we did 2 global fasts to turn the COVID pandemic, made no difference whatsoever.
To illustrate the opposition of temptation, the Book of Mormon describes 3 methods the devil will use in the last days. First, he will rage in the hearts of the children of men and stir them up to anger against that which is good. Second, he will pacify and lull members away into carnal security, saying, Zion prospereth, all is well. Third, he will tell us, there is no hell, and I am no devil, for there is none, and therefore there is no right and wrong. Because of this opposition, we are warned not to be at ease in Zion.
Should we talk about those 3 methods real quick?
Yeah, definitely.
So
They're
first,
interesting.
raging in the hearts of the children of men, stirring them up to anger against that which is good. I kind of want to address that one actually, first of all, because I don't know about you, but I've definitely been accused of being angry.
Oh, yes.
Even though I think I keep quite an even keel during everything I do.
Yeah. I'm livid. I'm
Absolutely.
incandescent with rage
Right now.
I've been angry for years, especially when listening to Dallin H. Oakes talks. I lose my rag.
The key is, it says, it stir them up to anger against that which is good. What we are being taught isn't good. And so we have every right to get angry.
Righteous wrath. Yeah.
Righteous rage and indignation. But but even then, I don't think I'm that angry until
very
people
chilled,
start
man.
gaslighting me.
Yeah.
And I get a little bit enraged. The second point, Satan will stop that by pacifying and lulling members away into carnal security, saying Zion prospereth, all is well. But
I think I just find that fascinating because in a way he's saying, we shouldn't be complacent, but all the other messaging is Zion prospereth, all is well. We're growing, the fastest growing religion in the world, which was always nonsense. And we look at all the new temples we're building. Now, they know they're lying. They know perfectly well that the active membership of the church is falling through the floor. My guess is 3 million, frankly. Usually people estimate around 4 or 5 million. But we'll see what COVID does.
What's the official figure? Something like 16?
16 million membership. And that's the number they keep using. And when they were gaslighting the Ensign Peak money, they kept the articles by the church journalists in Deseret News always began with this long spiel. In a church of 16 million people, no wonder we're spending so much money. It's like, well, no, it's actually maybe 1 million tithe payers. And the way I get my 3 million thing is 30,000 congregations in the world. I think an average of 100 active members for each is generous.
I think so, yeah.
People in America are used to much larger numbers on average, but we know it's microscopic here in Europe and other places in most congregations. To keep with this narrative, the church is growing, everything's fine, we're progressing.
Yeah.
And also the other ingredient, not just pretending exponential growth is happening when it isn't, but the other ingredient of you can totally trust us. We are such amazing, infallible leaders. You don't need to question anything we do, not even down to policies. And they've just introduced into the new handbook this year, which is online for the first time in totality, so everyone can read it. They've added to the definition of apostasy, not just opposing leaders and doctrines, but also specifically opposing policy. Now, policy used to be this flexible category of, well, we'll change our policies every few years. That doesn't quite matter.
Yeah.
But now you're not even allowed to disagree with the policy of the church about mother and baby rooms or how many paper towels to send to a ward.
Because that's all policy.
It's all policy.
Yeah.
Anything in here and you're apostate. So they've declared mental totalitarianism. You cannot disagree with any decision about anything, even if it's temporary. So that's how amazingly good Zion is at the moment. We don't even need to disagree or question anything.
I mean, I'm sure that's one way to build Zion, isn't it? Just crush everyone's free spirit until Zion is the place you want it to be.
Yeah. Well, they want it to be, and no one else is having much fun with it. It's
no,
getting
not
boring.
really. No, I'm certainly not having.
What was the first one again? Sorry, the
first one that he rages in the hearts of the children of men and stirs them up to anger.
He's probably, and in other talks, he would be very clear that means the people criticizing the church.
Yes.
He's touching on this crisis that they have, that they're aware they're in this battle for hearts and minds, and anyone criticizing them, or they're strengthening the church members committee.
Yes.
Hey guys,
hey,
add it to the portfolio, our files.
The third one is telling us that there is no hell and I am no devil. There is none.
I'm really.
They're doing the same thing to us, but in a slightly different way.
Yeah. But I think also I'm really interested by this because a lot of the youth wing of Fair Mormon who are producing Book of Mormon Central and This Is the Show, the tits videos and so on, they keep framing their struggle as being in an existential struggle with secularism, with the idea of postmodern ethics whereby there is no absolute truth, you have your own truth, this postmodern idea. And in there, in Hannah Syriac's interviews on Fair Voice, on these videos, they constantly reference this idea that the reason we're losing people from the church is the idea of people buying into an amoral, secular, philosophical idea that there are no absolute truths. That's not why people are leaving the church. Do you know anyone? I mean, maybe the rare, occasional person. The reason people are leaving and the real struggle is they're finding out how much they were lied to. It's that simple.
It's really simple. And this is why I say they're kind of doing that to us in the same way, saying there is no devil. They keep saying that there's no one behind the curtain. Stop looking behind the curtain. There's no one there. There's nothing there.
To fear or be suspicious of.
But actually, so they're trying to remove our desire to think critically.
Which is clearly a strategy that has been going on for a long time. So it's just creating all these straw men, all these red herrings. It's the reason this is the issue. I will define for you what the reason people are in faith crisis or how Satan's raging in the hearts of men, while very carefully making sure I absolutely do not mention the reason 90% of the people who are losing their faith in our religion are going.